to Winning Retirement TV. My name is Cynthia DeFazio, joined today by Greg and Kristin Taylor of Legacy Retirement Group. And to our viewers at home, we have a very special show for you today. We're going to talk about the top 5 retiree regrets. Why? Because we don't want you to make these same regrets. Now, these regrets actually come from a study that was done by Lincoln's 2023 Consumer Sentiment Tracker. So we're going to make sure to avoid these retirement mistakes that you may make without watching the show. Kristin, how are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm fantastic. Thank you so much for asking. Always beautiful every time I see you.
Oh, thank you as well as you.
Oh, thank you so much. And Greg, you look very dapper today.
Oh, thank you, Dapper Greg.
Yes. Dapper Greg is here.
I'm excited about today's show because, you don't want really people towards the end of their retirement to look back and have regrets.
Right.
Yes. And so often people can make some mistakes without even realizing. Like number one, this is very interesting. Greg, I'm going to guide this right to you. Not saving more. People are regretting that they did not save more.
When you get to that point where you're 65 years old and now, a lot of people love what they do and just want to keep working their whole life. Sometimes they're not able to. Sometimes they get to that point where their job is no longer giving them the option,
Yes.
You don't want people to have the regret of not saving enough. So one of the things we want people to do is start early.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Start early, as young as you, as soon as you get that first job, start saving. In fact, we have an electrician doing some work for us at the house, and I was going through some things with him recently, and he said, you do investments in retirement planning, right? And I said, well, yeah, that's what we do. And he's like, what would you recommend for someone like me? And he's in his early 20s. I said,
wow,
start now.
Wow.
And I gave him some ideas. I said, start a Roth IRA, start putting money away every week. Don't just say, well, when I get some money together, I'm going to start saving, because that's not purposeful enough.
Well, the other day, Christian and Cameron were doing this thing for their class where they had to interview us. Do you remember? Mm-hmm. And one of the questions that my son Christian asked was, what regrets do you have in business or in life?
Wow.
And I said, well, it's hard. I think that it's important to not look at things as a regret, but more as a learning experience, right?
Yes.
So when you're moving forward and you're pushing forward, you can maybe use the things that maybe weren't the best decision or maybe weren't the thing you did quite right as a stepping block to doing the right thing. And so with this, I like to look at it a little more positively and say, well, maybe you are getting close to retirement age and you don't feel like you saved enough or you started early enough. Well, do something about it now. Do something by actually starting to plan for what you have.
That makes sense.
And move forward with that.
That makes sense. I love that. Very, very sage advice, because so often people, especially in their earlier years, they forget to save. Very, very important.
The second
Absolutely.
part, and the second part of that, Cynthia, is stay consistent.
Yes.
Stay consistent. You don't have to save more than somebody else. You just need to be consistent. Find what you can afford, what you can, feasibly do, and then do it over and over and over again. And we meet people all the time, Cynthia. They're millionaires today, not because they made a boatload of money, but because they stay consistent over their entire working lives. But, we had a couple come in recently. Their goal was to be millionaires before they retired. Mm-hmm. And at one point, they had over $1 million, but, with market volatility and things like that, they had fallen back below $1 million. They had about $920,000. And some of their investments didn't work out the way they thought. And they were so discouraged when they came in. We wanted to save $1 million. We're retiring. We didn't hit our goal. I said, well, not all is lost. You did a great job of saving. Let's see where you stand. So when we started doing the math with them, figuring out, and the husband was 65, the wife was 64. They had just retired, and they came in. And we looked, and I said, okay, what do you really need to fill your income gap? And when we did the math, we realized they needed an additional $30,000 a year. Mm-hmm. So with that, we were able to put $400,000 into their income plan to generate a sustainable $30,000 a year. So between Social Security, a pension, and that was going to meet their income need.
Wow.
So that left over $500,000 that could go in their growth fund, where they could grow it over time to keep pace with inflation, to help with healthcare costs and things like that. So I said, your goal was to save $1 million. You didn't quite get there, but guess what? You're going to be fine.
Yeah.
I love that.
So they walked away from that appointment realizing, okay, we didn't get where we wanted to get with our savings, but we accomplished something even more important. That is being able to retire with confidence.
Absolutely. And peace of mind. That's
Yes.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, Kristin, this next one is ignoring inflation. People regret ignoring inflation.
Yeah, so what goes up doesn't always come back down, right?
Right.
We've seen that with pricing, and if you look at prices over time, there are some things that fluctuate, at the grocery store, maybe they go way high and then they come back down, but overall, your expenses are gonna probably stay high as they tick their way up to a higher point. And so making sure that you account for that in your retirement plan is really important. So what are some ways you can account for that? Well, one, you can diversify your investments.
Okay.
And by that, I don't mean just, spreading it around in the market per se. You could consider something like an annuity for your foundation of your income, and then your investments would help grow to keep pace with inflation as well then. So that's one way.
It is, and we have to realize what inflation really means. And if you look back over the last 100 years, inflation has averaged about 3.3%. I know the Fed would like it to be at 2, but realistically, it's probably not going to be at 2%. So at 3.3%, it takes, in 11 years, your costs go up about 50%.
Okay.
So if you're spending, $80,000 a year now, in 11 years, you're going to be spending about $120,000 a year. So
Theoretically, yeah.
Theoretically, in that range, at least that's the probability. So we have to think about that. Now, retirement does take on different phases, and we
Right.
also have to account for this because, the first 10 to 15 years of retirement are our busiest years. We are hopefully traveling or, taking care of projects or spending more time, going places with grandkids and things like that. By the time we're in our mid to upper 70s, that does slow down a bit. So the spending can slow down a bit as we're also accounting for increased costs, but there should be something outlined in a written income plan, Cynthia,
Absolutely.
that addresses this. And this is really the key, because as I'm hearing people talk about how they're going to address inflation, it is, well, I'm hoping that the market will grow enough so that I can keep pace with inflation.
Or I'm going to adjust my spending.
Yes.
Which isn't always realistic either.
be honest,
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
I don't like that plan. I don't want people to have to spend less because they have to. I want people to spend less if they want to, but in reality, the spending plan should be set up. Really all a written income plan is a written spending plan.
Yes.
I like that.
I do
Yeah.
too. That's much better. We don't want budget.
No, but in that written plan, it should account for inflation. And we want people to have that confidence and peace of mind going into retirement that, okay, I'm not just hoping for the best, but I'm planning for the worst.
Yes. It's all coming down to proper planning. And Greg, you and Kristin have a very special offer to present. Let's talk about what that is before we take our first commercial break.
We do, because retirement planning really encompasses all the areas: your investment strategy, your income plan, your taxes, healthcare, and whatever you leave behind, getting that to those you love as efficiently as possible. But I would say the majority of you sitting at home today don't really have a written plan to accomplish those things. You kind of hope that things are going to be well, but we want you to have the confidence that things are going to be well. So we're going to offer our complete planning review, so people can dig in, have a plan that's written down for them that really accounts for all these things, inflation and all those things. So that's what we're offering today.
Greg, thank you so much. Kristin, thank you so much. To our viewers at home, the number to call is 614-336-7660. What you're calling in for today, of course, is that complete planning review. Let Greg and Kristin take a look at what you currently have in place. Are you on the right path for retirement? We're going over the top 5 retiree regrets today, and Greg and Kristin do not want you to fall into that category where you're making the same mistakes. Completely complimentary. All you have to do is call in 614-336-7660 or grab your smartphone, click on that QR code at the bottom corner of your screen. That will take you right to the landing page for Legacy Retirement Group, and you can book your time accordingly. We're going to take a very short commercial break. As I mentioned, we are talking about the top 5 retiree regrets. We have 3 more to get through. Stay tuned.
Plan smart, retire well. How do you do that? Many times we meet families and they actually think they have a plan.
But what about when you want to upgrade your house? What about when your wife wants to buy new furniture?
No investment decision should be made outside the context of a plan. So what is your plan? We believe in the 3-bucket approach as it comes to your finances. Your liquid bucket, which is what I call the sleep well at night account, for when the what ifs happen in life. Your income bucket, which is there to meet the gap between Social Security, maybe a pension, and what you really want to live in. We believe you should protect that income, then grow the rest. And then your growth bucket. The growth bucket's really focusing on helping you achieve your growth goals. As you transition from your working career to retirement, we want that to be the greatest moment of your life, and we don't want you to fumble the ball.
So imagine, when you're working, you're getting a paycheck. When you're retired, you have to pay yourself. The 3-bucket approach is a really easy way for people to start compartmentalizing what they're doing with their money.
We want you to be successful in any economy. We want you to thrive no matter what's going on. Worry and fear and greed are the biggest problems when it comes to investing. We want to take that off the table, and we want to make sure you have a consistent growth strategy. We want you to be just as successful in your retirement plan as you were in your accumulation plan.
Welcome back to Winning Retirement Television with Greg and Kristin Taylor. My name is Cynthia DeFazio, and we're talking all about the top 5 retiree regrets. Greg and Kristin don't want you to make any of these. So number 1 was not saving more. Number 2 was ignoring inflation. Number 3, this is according to an Employee Benefit Research Institute, 36% of those surveyed say that healthcare costs are giving them financial worry at night. So number 3 and 4 are going to make perfect sense to you. So Kristin, let me guide this to you. Not underestimating Medicare and healthcare costs is number 3 in that top 5 retirement worries.
Yeah, healthcare has just gotten really expensive. And I think this goes along the lines of inflation as well, just because health costs have been inflated to a higher level than other costs that we've seen. And also just understanding what's going to be the outcome or the trajectory of healthcare costs throughout your retirement. Because like Greg mentioned earlier, early on, you're young, you're still, moving through life pretty normally. And then unfortunately, 10, 15 years in, that's where we start seeing more health crisis coming into play. And those costs along with it are what causes an issue in the retirement plan.
Sure.
And I've seen many reports that show that a retiree can expect to spend anywhere from $200,000 to $300,000 during their retirement years on health care. This is not long-term care. This is health care.
Just normal health care.
This is our health insurance premiums, our prescription drugs, and other health costs.
Dental, vision, and all those things.
Exactly. Those health care costs. And when you start accounting, if there's a family that saved $300,000 for retirement, now they look and say, well, gosh, my entire savings could be eaten away from healthcare costs.
Yes, that's scary.
That's a scary proposition. It really is. And for us, as we're trying to help these families prepare for that, trying to make sure that they're going to be okay with their income, make sure that they can have some fun. I mean, who wants to work their whole life and retire and not have any fun?
Nobody I know.
No, nobody I know either. So we're trying to make it to where people can enjoy their retirement as much as possible, but don't discount the impact of healthcare costs that can really derail a retirement. And we don't want people having those regrets.
Yes.
So making sure that you're properly covered, making sure you're getting the best value, making sure that you're doing the right things in line of your health care, that is huge. It's a big one. And if people don't pay attention to it, it can sneak up and really mess up their entire retirement plan.
Sure, because like you mentioned, obviously those first, 15 years are really the go-go years, but we're talking about maybe the slow-go years right now.
Yes.
That's right.
Things just start aching and hurting and you just need care. And to not plan for that can be very scary financially.
It can be. And I mean, number 4 goes along with what we're talking about here with the long-term care insurance costs. With long-term care insurance, I mean, it's a house payment now, let's face it. I mean, if you have long-term care insurance that you purchased years ago and it's had an increasing rider on it, I mean, you probably are good with that. But to go out and purchase some right now, I mean, it's restrictive financially for most families.
Sure.
Well, the real problem here is long-term care insurance companies, I don't believe, did a very good job in how they
Pricing.
have underwritten long-term care insurance. So many of those companies are struggling right now. And one of the largest providers of long-term care insurance last year had a 110% rate increase.
Wow, 110%?
110%.
Wow.
And it's huge. So what we're
And it's
looking...
so hard to think about canceling it once you have
yeah.
it.
Well, exactly.
Right? So you're just going to
you
pay
got
it
so
because
much
you
money
cancel.
tied up into it.
That's
right.
true.
That's it.
And so we're not necessarily pushing long-term care insurance right now because it's really sketchy as how financially feasible some of these companies actually are. But there are some options. We don't believe someone should just ignore long-term care because long-term care insurance companies are struggling. So there's hybrid plans. We just did a proposal for a family. The wife didn't qualify for traditional long-term care insurance, so we found a hybrid plan it's an annuity contract that allows for leverage benefits for long-term care. So in this case, they deposit $200,000 in, and the wife will have $450,000 initially to cover long-term care, but that number grows over time.
Okay.
So she's 63 right now. By the time she's 80, that number is somewhere close to $700,000 that they would have to use for long-term care expenses.
Wow.
Now, the nice part about this is that $200,000 original deposit, it also increases over time. So if the couple never uses this plan, then their beneficiaries received the original $200,000 plus all the increase that it's had, and there's not additional premiums. So things like that, those hybrid plans are certainly beneficial. We have a number of clients, Cynthia, that have used what we call rider doublers income rider doublers or enhancements. So if someone's getting, say, $30,000 a year from a lifetime income rider, under certain events, that could double to $60,000 a year for home health care, for nursing home, for assisted living.
Okay.
That's one way to address it. Another way is having money set aside for the option of using it should these unfortunate events take place, right?
Sure.
So as a part of your overall plan, say a hybrid option isn't something you're interested in, you're thinking, okay, I don't want to do that. Well, that's fine too. We can segment, put it in buckets, if you will, segment, however you want to call it, the dollars that you have saved for retirement, allocate those dollars to the use of that should those needs come up. And they can be growing all the while you're waiting and hopefully not needing them for those uses,
Yes,
right?
yes, absolutely.
Yes, and for emergency situations where we're just trying to protect assets, we work with one of the best, I believe, elder law attorneys in the state of Ohio that really does a great job of helping families put the pieces together and preserve as many of the assets as possible. So elder law planning is another strategy that can be used most often when it's an emergency situation.
Sure. That makes perfect sense. Well, it's time for our second commercial break. To our viewers at home, there's a number to call on your screen, 614-336-7660. What we're talking about today are the top 5 retiree regrets. Greg and Kristin are trying to make sure that you can avoid some of these regrets that some people currently have. They're offering you the complete planning review. Let Greg and Kristin get to know you one-on-one. What are your goals? What are your dreams? And what are your hopes for retirement? Are you on the right path to retire comfortably? If not, this is the perfect opportunity to call in and take advantage of that complimentary planning review. That number again is 614-336-7660. If you don't have your pen handy, that's okay. You can just put that aside. Grab your smartphone, click on the QR code at the bottom corner of your screen. That will take you right to the landing page for Legacy Retirement Group, and you can claim your spot accordingly. We're going to take a very short commercial break. Again, we're going over the top 5 regrets that retirees sometimes have. We're going to jump into number 5. Stay tuned.
We know the market is going to get worse from here. This is the biggest monthly decline in 10 years. People's 401ks took a major hit.
Well, my investments are tanking. My retirement isn't going as planned. I can't believe I let my kid talk me into buying crypto. I mean, what is that anyway?
This was the 4th worst contraction in history.
So how are you two doing?
Your financial future doesn't have to be uncertain. I'm Greg Taylor with Legacy Retirement Group. If you've amassed a nest egg, it's time for a financial advisor to help you reach your retirement goals. This is one of the greatest tax windows in history. Now is the time to take advantage of this tax discount while you can. We specialize in retirement planning, tax mitigation, estate planning, and much more. Plan your retirement right. Call now for your complimentary portfolio review and tax analysis.
Welcome back to Winning Retirement Television. My name is Cynthia DeFazio, joined today by Greg and Kristin Taylor of Legacy Retirement Group, and we're talking about the top 5 retiree regrets, and we want to make sure that you avoid those. So we've gone over number 1, not saving more. Number 2, ignoring inflation. Number 3, not understanding or underestimating Medicare and healthcare costs. Number 4, not having long-term care insurance. This next one, number 5, this is on the top 5 list, of course, waiting too long to plan. Wow. Kristin, what are your thoughts on that? Waiting too long to plan.
I like to address this kind of positively, like I kind of alluded to earlier in the show. I think it's never too late to plan. You can start today, even if you should have done it years ago. But I think it's really important is once you recognize that you don't actually have a plan. So understanding a 401k is not a plan, an IRA is not a plan, an investment account is not a plan. Any of these insurances that you might have, none of those are actual plans for your retirement. Actually sitting down and understanding what dollars are going to be used for what the trajectory of growth is for the different types of accounts that you have, why you're invested the way you have, those are all part of a solid plan.
Yes.
And so once you recognize that, going ahead and getting the ball rolling and actually jumping in and planning is really, really important whenever that point of recognition is.
And realize an ounce of prevention is worth a
pound of cure.
It is.
I would not have gotten that saying right. You know how I do with sayings.
Exactly. But the pain of regret is so much worse than the effort it takes to get a solid plan in place.
Yes.
And it's so painful when you look back and say, if I just would have done this,
Yes.
Right.
whatever it is, then you look back and say, why didn't I do that? Why didn't I take the time to plan? Why didn't I take the time to set up, a retirement investment plan instead of being more aggressive like I was when I was still working? Or why didn't I take time to set up a written income plan to make sure that my income was going to be okay? Or why didn't I take time to look at taxes?
Yes, big one.
And I can tell you, I just sat down with a family. They'd saved almost $2 million between 401ks and IRAs. And they were in their early 60s. He said, with any amount of growth, Greg, by the time I'm 73, there's probably $3.5 to $4 million in tax deferred. And the realization hit them when we did a tax map in the office and they saw what the required minimum distribution would be on those tax deferred dollars. And he said, Greg, it just hit me. The more this money grows, the more I'm going to owe Uncle Sam.
Wow.
And he said, I had the opportunity to change to a Roth, and my tax person told me, don't do it. You have to pay more taxes this year. And he said, I thought differently, but I didn't do anything about it. And he said, now I have regret. But what would be even worse, Cynthia, because right now we're in some great tax rates.
Sure.
What would be even worse is if they ignored it now.
Absolutely.
Because what's it going to be like if you have 4 million, or if someone has a $500,000 and it grows to $1 million? The more it grows, the more they owe Uncle Sam.
Yeah.
It really does.
It's true.
Yeah, it's easy to look at it like, health testing. We get screenings done, right, all the time
Absolutely.
for different things. And last year, I heard about this Prenovo scanning.
Yes.
Yeah, we talked about it.
Yes.
Where they do a full body scan and check for things. I'd had some health issues. And so now I have a baseline and I had something to go off of. I saw there were some areas of concern. So now when I go back, I can check to see if those areas have gotten better, have they gotten worse? But if you never test it, how will you know until there's maybe damage that's irreparable? Like,
exactly
we've
right.
talked about on the show before with families. So step number 1 in waiting too long to plan, and now you're recognizing you waited maybe too long, is to test where you're at.
Yes, and for those of you that are watching right now, if you saved at least $500,000 in an IRA or 401k, something like that, I would recommend you go to testmyretirement.com. You can fill in your information. You can get your own RMD report tax map as to what that might look like for you. I'd encourage you to do that. Testmyretirement.com. No cost, no obligation. Just go there and you can get the information for yourself. So not only testing things, Cynthia, but also don't just assume you're okay.
Right.
Don't just assume your investments will work the same in retirement as they did when you were growing it. Don't just assume that taxes won't be higher. Don't just assume income's going to work out. Don't just assume that you're going to be okay. That's a big one. Make sure that all areas are covered.
Yes. Investments,
Income, taxes, healthcare, and whatever you leave behind, getting that to those you love as efficiently as possible. This is some of the biggest mistakes we see and some of the biggest regrets when people have one thing covered and they just assume all the areas are covered.
And I think going through and checking the boxes, literally, I think is important. We went on a trip and Kristin was supposed to bring his computer and I given him a list to check off and he assumed his computer was in his book bag and it wasn't. Oh. He didn't check, right? So really making sure you're looking at each area with a professional.
Yes.
And making sure that those areas are okay. Don't just assume.
Right. And then have a written plan.
Yes.
Now, in our office, we have a database that we use. And we often say if it's not in the database, it didn't happen. Every little thing, every phone call that comes in, every time we talk with a client, every conversation that takes place, it goes into the database so that we can make sure we're serving our people properly. Mm. So we tell them if it's not in there, it never happened. And guess what, folks? If you don't have a written plan, do you have a plan? Well, I've had the same thing happen, working for me for 30 years, and that plan surely will work the same. But I can promise you that money doesn't work the same when you're accumulating it as it does when you're taking distributions.
Very true.
It's night and day. It really is.
Absolutely.
So having a written plan, I can't emphasize that enough. It will make the difference in many cases between success and failure.
100%. Kristin, thank you so much for an amazing show. And Greg, thank you as always as well. To our viewers at home, most specifically, thank you for spending time with us. Remember, you need to have a plan in place. Greg and Kristin are offering you the complimentary planning review. Call into the number on your screen, 614-336-7660, or grab your smartphone, click on that QR code at the bottom corner of your screen. Be safe, be happy, and be blessed. We'll see you back 1 week from today on Winning Retirement TV with Greg and Kristin Taylor.